The myths of Deathworlders. The Galactic Council had long dismissed the tales of the Deathworlders as nothing more than legends, stories whispered by travelers who had never returned, ancient texts spoken of beings so powerful that they could conquer entire star systems with nothing but their will and strength. But these were just myths, stories passed down over countless generations. No one took them seriously, not even the empire that spanned across thousands of worlds. The galaxy had seen peace for thousands of years. The great galactic empire was untouchable. Its fleets patrolled the stars, and its weapons were unmatched. The Galactic Council, a powerful assembly of alien species, governed with absolute authority. They had faced wars, invasions, and uprisings in the past, but they always emerged victorious. Their technology had advanced far beyond anything any species could imagine. They were the rulers of the universe, and nothing could challenge their might. One day, an expedition was sent deep into uncharted space to explore a distant sector. The mission seemed simple: survey the area, gather data, and confirm that the region was still uninhabited. The scouts were instructed to report back in a few weeks, but days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months with no word. The Galactic Council grew uneasy. What had happened to the expedition? At last, a single distress signal was received from the lost fleet. The message was weak, barely audible, but one thing was clear: they had encountered something unexpected. The Council's most trusted intelligence officers were dispatched to decipher the signal. It came from a small, almost forgotten planet in the distant corner of the galaxy, Earth. The last known record of Earth was centuries old, marked as a dead world, a planet that had been destroyed in a catastrophic event long before the Empire's rise. Any surviving life, if there was any, would have been primitive, perhaps nothing more than scavengers or mutated beasts roaming the ruins. But when the galactic ships arrived in Earth's orbit, they found something far different. The planet wasn't dead. It wasn't even close to dead. The atmosphere, while harsh and dangerous, showed signs of life. Vast, expansive life. They detected strange energy signatures emanating from the surface. There were reports of movement, large movements, as though massive forces were gathering beneath the surface. The Council laughed at first, dismissing it as nothing more than a glitch in their sensors or some kind of anomaly. After all, how could a primitive, dead world harbor such activity? They had studied this planet before. No advanced civilization had ever been known to exist here. The humans who once lived there had long since perished. But the anomalies continued. The human colonies that once occupied Earth had been wiped out, or so the Council thought. The record spoke of a brutal war that had left Earth shattered. But this was something else entirely. It was as if a dormant beast had awakened, and the galaxy was unaware of its existence. The Council sent a small fleet to investigate further, hoping to confirm that Earth's myths were simply tales spun by the more superstitious factions. They sent warships equipped with the latest technology, nothing short of the best the galaxy had to offer. The fleet was led by Commander Zoreth, a veteran officer with over 200 years of service. He had seen every challenge the galaxy could throw at him, and his reputation as a tactician was unmatched. He would deal with whatever strange anomaly was lurking on Earth, and he would deal with it swiftly. As the fleet entered Earth's orbit, the fleet commander took a moment to gaze upon the planet. It appeared desolate from space, as expected. The surface was marked by craters and ruined cities, the remnants of a forgotten war. But there was something strange about the way the planet seemed to pulse. Energy readings from below the surface were unlike anything Zoreth had ever encountered. "Prepare for landing," Zoreth ordered, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable edge of anticipation. "Deploy the scouts. Let's see what we're dealing with." The ships descended into the atmosphere. As they broke through the clouds, the view below them was even more striking. Vast, unexplored forests stretched as far as the eye could see, and massive stone structures, long abandoned, loomed over the land. It was a desolate world, but it wasn't lifeless. It was waiting. Then the fleet's sensors picked up something else, something that sent a chill down the spine of every officer aboard. A faint signal. A signal that shouldn't exist on a world thought to be devoid of life. And even more disturbing, it was calling to them. "This is impossible," Zorath muttered to himself. "There should be no signal here. No communication systems are left on Earth." The signal grew louder, clearer, until it was unmistakable. It was a distress call, a signal from the past, yet it carried a warning of some kind, and it was coming from deep within one of the ancient ruins. Zorath ordered the fleet to land near the source of the signal. As the ships settled into the dirt, the commanders of the other ships exchanged nervous glances. Earth's surface had been a wasteland, nothing more than a forgotten piece of galactic history. But now, it seemed to be stirring. Something was alive here. "We've been sent on a fool's errand," one of the younger officers said. "It's a dead world. We should just leave." But Zorath was silent. He had been on too many missions to take such risks lightly. If there's one thing I've learned in all my years, it's that no world is ever truly dead. "Let's move out." The ground was thick with dust as the troops disembarked. Their boots left deep marks in the soil, evidence that the ground hadn't felt any weight in centuries. They made their way through the ancient ruins, passing broken walls and collapsed buildings, until they reached the source of the signal. A massive structure stood before them. It was unlike anything they had seen before. Massive metal doors, rusted with age, were set into the stone. Zorath's heart pounded in his chest. This was not a typical structure. It was far too advanced for a primitive species to have built it. With a deep breath, Zorath ordered the doors to be opened. The noise of metal grinding against metal filled the air as the door creaked open. The moment it did, the team was hit by a wave of heat and pressure. It was as if the structure had been sealed away for millennia, only now releasing the air trapped inside. Then, the door opened fully. The sight inside was beyond anything they could have imagined. Ancient machinery hummed to life. A single ship, rusted but still intact, stood in the center of the room. It was the size of a small warship, and it was a design unlike any Zorath had ever seen. It was old, very old, but its power was still present, lying dormant, waiting. Zorath took a step forward. "We've just awakened something." It was then that the reality began to sink in. They hadn't discovered a dead planet. They had discovered the rebirth of a civilization, one that had been dormant for thousands of years. And this time, it would not go unnoticed. The ground trembled beneath the feet of Zorath and his soldiers as the ancient ship roared to life. Dust and debris swirled in the air as energy surged through the long-dormant machine. The eerie blue glow of unknown technology illuminated the chamber, casting long shadows on the crumbling walls. The ship, though old and worn, did not look like a relic anymore. It looked alive, as if it had merely been waiting for the right moment to awaken. Zorath's instincts screamed at him to retreat, but his pride kept him rooted in place. He was one of the most seasoned commanders in the Galactic Council's fleet. He had faced countless battles, conquered rebellious worlds, and broken civilizations that dared to oppose the Council's rule. But this was something different. This was not an enemy fleet. This was not a species fighting to defend their home. This was a ghost from the past, one that had been buried in time, now waking up before his very eyes. The signal they had detected was not a distress call. It had been a warning, a trigger that had finally been activated after centuries of silence. Whatever had built this ship had left it behind with a purpose. The question that burned in Zorath's mind was simple: who had left it here, and why? His soldiers stood frozen, their weapons raised, but Zorath knew that they were as uncertain as he was. What would a plasma rifle do against something like this? The ship's design was unlike anything recorded in the Galactic Council's archives. It was sleek, angular, built for war, yet its surface bore deep scars of ancient battles. It was clear that this ship had seen conflict before. The symbols carved into the metal were unfamiliar, yet something about them felt almost deliberate, as if they were meant to be understood, even after thousands of years. One of his officers, a young tactical analyst named Vexer, stepped forward hesitantly. "Commander," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the humming of the awakening ship, "this technology, it's not from any known empire. It's—" A loud mechanical hiss cut him off. The ship's entrance, an angular doorway seamlessly embedded into its hull, began to shift. The metal twisted and folded inward, revealing a dark passageway leading into the vessel. A gust of stale air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of time itself. Dust, rust, and something unplaceable. Something old. Zoreth clenched his jaw. There was no turning back now. He motioned for his soldiers to advance. Slowly, they stepped forward, their boots echoing against the metal floor as they crossed into the unknown. The ship's interior was nothing like they expected. Unlike the crude, industrial designs of most warships, this one was sleek, clean, and unnervingly quiet. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the walls, pulsing as if responding to their presence. Vexer ran a gloved hand over one of the panels. "This isn't just a warship," he murmured. "It's something more. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our records." Zoreth didn't respond. His attention was fixed ahead. At the end of the corridor, a single door stood partially open. Faint, rhythmic sounds echoed from within. A heartbeat. No, not a real heartbeat. Something artificial, something mechanical. The ship wasn't just coming back to life. It was preparing for something. The team advanced cautiously, stepping into what appeared to be the ship's central command room. The moment they did, the walls flickered, and holographic displays flared to life. Ancient battle reports, star maps of a galaxy that no longer existed. And there, in the center of it all, was an image of a figure, a humanoid warrior clad in armor, standing amidst the ruins of what had once been a battlefield. The inscription beneath the figure was written in an unfamiliar language, but the translator implants in their suits struggled to interpret it. Slowly, the meaning became clear. "Deathworlders do not kneel." Zoreth's heart pounded. His mind raced with the implications. The legends were true. The stories, the warnings, the whispered myths of the Deathworlders, they were not fabrications. They had been real. And if this ship was proof of their existence, then it meant only one thing. The Deathworlders were not gone. A sudden alert blared through their communication channels, jolting the entire squad into action. One of the fleet's orbiting ships had sent a distress signal of its own. Something was happening outside. "Commander, you need to see this," a voice crackled through his earpiece. Zoreth exchanged glances with his officers before responding. "Report. Massive energy surge detected from the planet's surface," the officer on the other end said, his voice laced with barely restrained panic. "It's coming from multiple locations. Something's waking up down here. And it's not just this ship." A deep, rumbling sound resonated through the earth beneath them. Dust fell from the ceiling, and cracks formed along the walls of the chamber. It was as if the entire planet was shifting, reacting to their presence. Zoreth gritted his teeth. They had stepped into something far bigger than they had anticipated. This was no mere discovery. This was a reawakening. The ship before them was just the beginning. The rumbling intensified, vibrating through the ground and into their very bones. Zoreth's grip tightened on his weapon as he instinctively ordered his squad to form up around him. The silence was replaced by the constant hum of machinery, the air thick with anticipation. Something was coming, something beyond their understanding. "Commander, we're not alone," Vexer muttered, his voice shaky as he scanned the surroundings. His weapon's sensors were picking up strange, erratic signals. It wasn't just the ship that was waking up. The entire planet seemed to be alive, reacting to their presence. Zoreth's mind raced. The last time the Council had encountered any technology like this, it had been on a distant world, long buried under layers of rock and time. That was a peaceful world, a world whose inhabitants had long since passed. But here, on this planet, there was no peace. The only thing alive here was a war that had never ended. Suddenly, the walls around them shifted. The dull hum grew louder, and then the ship's systems surged, flooding the room with blinding light. The holographic displays around them flickered, and the same image from before, the figure of the armored warrior, appeared again, this time more vivid and detailed. Zorath could feel the weight of its gaze, the intensity of its presence. The warrior was not a symbol of hope, it was a harbinger of war. A deep mechanical voice suddenly boomed from the ship's speakers, its tone cold and authoritative. "The Deathworlders have returned." The words echoed in the chamber, sending a chill through Zorath's spine. He had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. The Deathworlders were the stuff of legend, an ancient race of warriors whose power was said to have shaped the very fabric of the galaxy. Some claimed they were gods, others insisted they were the ultimate soldiers, built to wage endless war. But until now, they had only been myths, forgotten by most, and feared by a few. Now, those myths were coming to life. Zorath felt his pulse quicken as he tried to steady his breathing. What does this mean? He whispered to himself, half in disbelief. How can they still be here? Vexer, still examining the display, looked up with a dawning realization. This ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a prison. Zorath turned to face him, his mind racing to catch up with the revelation. A prison. Yes, Vexer confirmed, his voice trembling. These Deathworlders, they were not defeated. They were sealed away, locked in time, until the right moment arrived. And now that moment has come. Whatever is happening on this planet, whatever is waking up, it's not just the ship. It's the Deathworlders themselves. A wave of disbelief washed over the squad. For a moment, no one spoke. How could this be real? The Deathworlders, these legendary figures who had once been thought to be long gone, were now waking up. And their prison, this ship, was the key. A deep guttural growl suddenly reverberated through the walls, like the growl of some great beast stirring from a deep slumber. Zorath's eyes widened as he looked around. It wasn't the ship's systems. This was something else. Something alive. "Get ready," Zorath barked, his voice steady despite the growing sense of dread. "We don't know what we're dealing with, but we can't afford to wait any longer." The squad moved quickly, setting up defensive positions. Their weapons, once tools of deterrence, now seemed like toys compared to the mystery they faced. Zorath had faced countless battles, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. They were standing on the edge of something far larger than any war they had fought before. The Deathworlders weren't just ancient warriors. They were a force of nature. The walls of the ship shook again, and the temperature in the room dropped suddenly. The screens around them flickered once more, and the image of the armored warrior grew clearer. Its eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, seemed to stare directly at Zorath. And then, without warning, the figure spoke again, its voice now clear and unyielding. "The war begins again. The Deathworlders are awake, and the galaxy will tremble." Zorath felt his heart race as the realization hit him with full force. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't a coincidence. The Deathworlders had been waiting, and now they were coming for the galaxy, starting with them. The Council, the Empire, every faction that had believed themselves safe, were now facing an enemy they had never fully understood. He turned to his squad, his eyes steely with determination. "We will survive this. We have to. For the galaxy's sake." But even as the words left his mouth, Zorath knew that survival would be no simple task. These were no ordinary warriors. They were legends, and now the legends were coming for them. Whatever the Deathworlders had in store, one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. Outside, the rumbling continued, and the ground trembled once more. The Deathworlders were not just myths. They were the beginning of something far worse. And this time, no one could stop them. The silence that followed the Deathworlders' declaration was suffocating. The members of Zorath's squad stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. It wasn't just the eerie voice echoing through the ship that unsettled them. It was the sheer weight of the situation. They were no longer the hunters, the conquerors. They were the prey, trapped on a ship that seemed to pulse with ancient power, surrounded by an enemy they could not even begin to comprehend. Zoreth took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. His mind was racing, trying to process the overwhelming information that had just been thrown at them. They were standing in the very heart of a mystery older than the galaxy itself, and the implications of that were staggering. The Deathworlders weren't just legends. They were real, and they were coming. "We need a plan," Zoreth said, his voice hoarse but firm. "And we need it fast." Vexor nodded, eyes scanning the displays that surrounded them. He muttered something under his breath, his hands working quickly to decode the alien language on the holographic screens. Zoreth could tell that Vexor was trying to make sense of the ship's controls, but nothing about this ship made sense. Its technology was far beyond anything the Council or any other faction had ever encountered. It was like they had stepped into another world, a world where the rules of physics and warfare didn't apply. "Commander, we've got a problem," Vexor said, his voice tense. "This ship, it's not just a vessel. It's a weapon. And from what I can tell, it's connected to the Deathworlders themselves." A cold shiver ran down Zoreth's spine. If the ship was somehow linked to these ancient warriors, it meant that the Deathworlders had the power to control it, to use it as a weapon against anyone who dared stand in their way. "Can we shut it down?" Zoreth asked, his voice sharp. The thought of the Deathworlders having control of this ship, of its weaponry, made his blood run cold. "I don't think so," Vexor replied. "It's not just a matter of turning it off. This ship is alive. The systems are integrated with the Deathworlders' technology, almost as if they were symbiotic. It's like trying to pull a heart out of a living being." Zoreth's mind raced. The Deathworlders had built this ship, this weapon, centuries ago, maybe even millennia. And now it was waking up, and with it, the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. The walls around them suddenly shifted again. The floor trembled beneath their feet, and the lights flickered. Zoreth's heart skipped a beat. Something was happening, something major. The ship was moving, or at least something inside it was waking up. The air grew thick with tension, and Zoreth instinctively reached for his weapon, as did the rest of the squad. "We've got to move," Zoreth ordered. "Whatever's happening, we need to get out of here before it's too late." But before anyone could respond, the entire ship shuddered, and a deafening roar echoed through the halls. The sound was primal, ancient, and full of rage. It was the sound of something waking up, something far older and far deadlier than any of them had ever imagined. Then the alarms began to blare, a high-pitched screech that rattled their eardrums. Red lights flashed urgently, and the ship's intercom crackled to life once again. "The Deathworlders are awake." The voice boomed, deeper this time, like the growl of a predator. "The galaxy is ours once again." Zoreth's mind was flooded with thoughts, but only one remained clear. The Deathworlders weren't just coming for them. They were coming for everything. They had been waiting, hidden away, for the right moment to strike. And now, that moment had arrived. "We can't wait for backup," Zoreth said, his voice filled with determination. "We need to find out what's really going on here and stop them before they can destroy everything." He turned to Vexor. "Can we find any way to communicate with the outside? We need to warn the fleet." Vexor nodded, but there was a shadow of doubt in his eyes. "I'll try, Commander. But I'm not sure how much control we have left." As Vexor worked, the rest of the squad moved into position, checking their weapons and securing any loose equipment. The entire ship felt like a ticking time bomb, and Zoreth could almost feel the weight of the Deathworlders' presence looming over them. Then, just as quickly as the alarms had started, they stopped. The ship's lights returned to normal, but the stillness was even more unsettling than the chaos that had preceded it. Zoreth could feel the tension in the air, like something was waiting to strike. "We need to find the heart of this ship," Zorath said, his voice low and commanding. "If the Deathworlders are going to make their move, we need to stop them at the source." The squad nodded, and with weapons raised, they moved deeper into the ship, following the faint hum of energy that seemed to pulse from the ship's core. They had no idea what they would find, but one thing was clear. They were not just exploring an ancient ruin. They were facing an ancient power that was waking up, and if they didn't act fast, they might not live to see the galaxy outside ever again. The deeper they ventured into the ship, the more the feeling of unease grew. The walls seemed to close in on them, the passageways narrowing, as if the ship itself was trying to trap them. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and Zorath could feel his pulse quicken with every step. Suddenly, they came to a massive chamber. The ceiling was impossibly high, and the walls were covered in strange, alien symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. In the center of the room stood an enormous structure, its dark surface gleaming with an unsettling energy. It was the heart of the ship, its power source. Zorath's breath caught in his throat as he realized what they were standing in front of. The Deathworlders had not just built a ship, they had built a weapon capable of annihilating entire fleets, and now that weapon was ready to be unleashed. "We've found it," Zorath muttered under his breath. "Now we need to destroy it before they do." The chamber pulsed with energy, the ancient symbols on the walls glowing brighter as Zorath and his squads stared at the massive structure before them. It wasn't just a power source, it was something more. The heart of the ship radiated an eerie presence, something that felt almost alive. Zorath's instincts screamed at him to act fast. Every second they wasted brought them closer to destruction. The Deathworlders were waking up, their power stirring through the ship like a sleeping beast rising from slumber. Vexor was already scanning the console, his fingers moving swiftly across the alien interface. His brow furrowed as he analyzed the data streaming before him. "This isn't just a core, Commander," he said. "It's a control system. It's connected to." Before he could finish, the walls trembled violently. The energy in the room surged, and a deep mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "You do not belong here." The voice was unlike anything they had heard before. It was neither robotic nor organic, but something in between, a voice that carried the weight of centuries. The squad tensed, weapons raised. Zorath stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. There was silence. Then suddenly, the center of the chamber shifted. The dark surface of the structure split open, revealing a tall, imposing figure. It stepped forward slowly, its glowing eyes locking onto them. A Deathworlder. It was unlike any being they had ever encountered. Its armor was ancient yet powerful, its body radiating an aura of sheer dominance. It moved with the grace of a predator, every step calculated and precise. "We were forgotten." The Deathworlder spoke, its voice deep and cold. "But we never died." Zorath's grip on his weapon tightened. His mind raced, trying to piece together what this meant. The legends had said the Deathworlders were long extinct, wiped out in ancient wars, or so the galaxy believed. But the truth was far more terrifying. They had not been destroyed. They had been waiting. "We came here seeking knowledge," Zorath said, trying to keep his tone neutral. "We did not intend to disturb." "You invaded," the Deathworlder interrupted. "You trespassed upon sacred ground, and now you must face judgment." The air in the chamber grew thick with tension. The squad stood frozen, their weapons ready but useless against a being so powerful. Zorath had to think fast. If the Deathworlders had been waiting all this time, then what had kept them from attacking the galaxy? "Why now?" "Your war is not with us," Zorath said firmly. "The galaxy believes you are a myth. They do not fear you. But if you seek vengeance, you will find that the universe is not the same as you left it." The Deathworlder tilted its head slightly, as if considering his words. "We do not seek vengeance," it finally said. "We seek to reclaim what was stolen from us." Zorath's eyes narrowed. And what is that? The Deathworlder stepped closer, the glowing symbols on its armor pulsing in sync with the chamber. Our empire. At that moment, the entire ship roared to life. The walls pulsed, energy surging through the corridors. Zorath felt the ground beneath his feet vibrate, and his earpiece crackled with static. "Commander," a voice shouted through the comms. It was one of their fleet officers. "The ship, it's powering up. Massive energy spikes detected." Zorath gritted his teeth. The Deathworlders weren't just waking up. They were about to take back the galaxy. The hum of the ship's energy became deafening as the Deathworlder towered before Zorath and his squad, its dark, glowing eyes narrowing. There was no doubt left in his mind. The legends were true, and the Deathworlders were about to make their grand return. The ship was awakening. Its systems, dormant for millennia, roared to life like the heartbeat of a giant. The walls trembled as lights flickered and massive engines began to power up, filling the room with an ominous vibration. Zorath took a deep breath. He had to act quickly. He looked at his squad, who were all still pointing their weapons at the towering figure, their expressions a mix of fear and disbelief. The aliens who had been believed to be myths were standing before them, stronger than ever. "They're going to launch the fleet," Vexor muttered, his fingers still moving frantically over his console. "The ship's reactors are powering up. We need to stop this." Zorath nodded, his mind racing. The Deathworlders had hidden in the shadows for centuries, waiting for this moment. And now that moment had arrived. "Commander, we don't have much time," Vexor added, his voice trembling. "If we don't disable the main reactor soon, this ship will be able to summon every warship in their fleet." The Deathworlder in front of them didn't move, as if watching them. But there was a cold amusement in its eyes, as if it knew that all their efforts would be in vain. "You think you can stop us?" the Deathworlder asked, its voice a low, menacing growl. "You think you can change what has been set in motion?" Zorath held his ground. "We may not be able to stop you completely, but we can slow you down. The galaxy isn't ready for you. It's been centuries since your kind last ruled. The universe has moved on. The people of the galaxy won't just hand over everything to you." The Deathworlder smiled, but it was a smile full of malice. "The galaxy has forgotten its true masters, and now we will remind them." A sudden loud sound echoed through the ship, and Zorath's comms flared to life. "Commander, the fleet is awake. They're launching. You need to stop them now." Zorath felt his blood run cold. The Deathworlders weren't just waking up, they were preparing to take over once again. "Vexor," Zorath snapped, "how long until we can shut down the reactors?" Vexor's fingers hovered over the console, his brow furrowed with concentration. "A minute, maybe less, but it'll be a long shot. If we fail, there's nothing stopping them." The tension in the air was palpable. Every second felt like an eternity. The hum of the ship's engines was deafening now, and Zorath could feel the raw power pulsing through the walls. He could hear the distant sound of weapon systems powering up, the preparation for war in the deepest recesses of the ship. "We need to get to the reactor now," Zorath commanded. "Move." The squad rushed forward, weapons ready, as they sprinted down the narrow corridors. The Deathworlder simply watched them go, unmoving, almost as if it was enjoying the chaos. Zorath knew this was only the beginning. Even if they managed to stop the reactor for now, there was no telling how long they could hold off the impending storm. The Deathworlders were relentless. They didn't play by the same rules as the rest of the galaxy. As they neared the reactor chamber, the sound of the ship's engines grew louder, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. Zorath's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. This was the moment that would decide whether they could stop the rise of an empire, or whether they would be the first casualties in a war the galaxy wasn't ready for. Suddenly, the doors to the reactor chamber burst open. A flood of energy filled the room, the power from the ship threatening to overwhelm them. Zorath stepped forward, taking in the sight of the massive reactor. Vexor immediately went to work, his fingers flying across the console as he tried to override the system. "We don't have much time," Vexor said, his voice tight with urgency. "If I can't access the override, we're all going to be caught in the explosion when this thing goes critical." Zorath's eyes flickered to the door behind them. The Deathworlder would be here soon. They had to act quickly. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. The console sparked, and Vexor cursed under his breath. "I can't disable the whole reactor system, but if I can trigger the overload, we might be able to stop them long enough to escape." Zorath looked at the rest of his squad. They were all ready for whatever came next. The weight of their task hung heavy, but there was no turning back now. The Deathworlders had awoken, and the galaxy would never be the same again. "Do it," Zorath said. "We'll hold them off." Vexor nodded, his fingers flying over the console in a blur. The hum of the reactor grew louder as the countdown began. It was a gamble. If they were wrong, the entire ship would explode. But if they succeeded, they could delay the Deathworlders long enough to warn the rest of the galaxy. The countdown reached 5 seconds. Zorath braced himself. There was no turning back. The countdown reached its final moments, and Zorath's heart raced. Sweat dripped from his brow. But his focus remained sharp. There was no room for error now. 3, 2, 1. Vexor whispered as he pressed the final button. A pulse of bright light erupted from the console, followed by a deep, thunderous roar as the reactor core began to destabilize. Zorath felt the floor beneath him tremble violently, and the entire ship seemed to groan under the pressure. The reactor's energy surged, then spiraled out of control. The faint sound of sirens echoed through the hallways, warning everyone aboard that the end was near. "Vexor, is it done?" Zorath shouted over the deafening noise. "I've triggered the overload." Vexor yelled back, his hand still frantically working the controls. "But we need to get out of here. Now." Without a second thought, Zorath turned and motioned to his squad. They began sprinting down the corridor, the walls vibrating violently with every passing second. The ship was on the verge of self-destruction, and every moment they delayed meant another chance for the Deathworlders to retaliate. But as they rounded a corner, they were met by a chilling sight. The Deathworlder, tall, imposing, and unfazed by the chaos around it, stood in their way. Its eyes glowed with an ancient fury, and its expression was full of scorn. "You think you can defeat us so easily?" The Deathworlder's voice echoed, low and deadly. "You are nothing compared to the might we wield." Zorath stopped in his tracks, his breath quickening. There was no escaping now. The ship was about to blow, and the Deathworlders were blocking their path. They were trapped. "We're not running from you," Zorath said, voice filled with defiance. "You'll have to deal with the aftermath of your awakening. And trust me, you won't enjoy it." The Deathworlder took a slow step forward, its enormous hand reaching for a weapon at its side. The tension in the air was thick, and Zorath felt the weight of the coming battle. Then a blast shook the corridor, followed by a deafening crash. The ship's walls groaned as another explosion rocked the entire structure. A voice came over Zorath's comm, a faint signal, but one he had been waiting for. "Zorath, this is the command fleet. We've picked up your signal. Get out of there, now." Zorath's heart leaped. The fleet had arrived. Their allies were coming. With newfound hope, Zorath gave a quick glance to his squad. "Move, now." The Deathworlder's gaze flickered to the incoming explosion, and for a brief moment, there was uncertainty in its eyes. It was a creature of war, but even it knew when the tide was shifting. As Zorath and his squad sprinted past, the Deathworlder hesitated for only a moment before it started after them, its heavy footsteps pounding like the very heartbeat of a war machine. Zorath didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. The countdown was ticking, and they needed to reach the escape pods. They rounded another corner, and ahead of them, the escape pods glowed brightly, waiting for them to board. But the ship was beginning to crack. The hull groaned under the strain as the power systems overloaded, and flames began licking up the walls. Another blast rocked the floor beneath them, throwing them off balance. Zorath stumbled but quickly regained his footing. Vexor was just ahead, and the rest of the squad was closing in on the pods. They had to make it. But then the ship's lights flickered, and everything went dark. For a split second, everything stopped. No one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the deafening silence of the ship's impending collapse. Then the lights came back on. Only this time, it was different. They flickered erratically before stabilizing, casting an eerie glow over the hallway. Zorath's eyes widened. The Deathworlder had caught up. It was standing at the end of the hall, blocking the escape route, its massive frame silhouetted by the flickering lights. It grinned menacingly as it raised its weapon. The squad stopped dead in their tracks, weapons raised, but they were no match for the sheer force of the Deathworlder. "We are not going to let you leave this ship," the Deathworlder growled, its voice dripping with menace. "You will never escape the wrath of our kind." But Zorath wasn't about to give up. The ship was about to explode, and the Deathworlders might have all the power in the universe, but they didn't know Earth or its warriors. With a fierce roar, Zorath charged forward, his squad following suit. They couldn't hesitate now. There was no turning back. They'd fought with everything they had, using every trick they had learned over years of battle. The Deathworlder swung its massive weapon, but Zorath and his squad were faster, more desperate. Just as the Deathworlder's weapon was about to strike, the ground shook again, and the walls of the ship buckled. It was as if the universe itself was telling them it was over. The ship was going to collapse, and they had one chance to survive. With one final powerful strike, Zorath and his squad incapacitated the Deathworlder, just as the entire ship's structure groaned one last time. The force of the explosion sent them flying into the escape pods, and as the doors slammed shut, they heard the distant roar of the ship's reactor reaching its breaking point. The escape pods shot away from the dying ship, and in the distance, they saw the massive fleet of Deathworlders preparing to launch. But it was too late. The ship had already given its final warning. The universe had been irrevocably changed. As Zorath looked out the viewport, his heart raced, but there was no time to rest. The war had just begun, and Earth's fleet had awakened. The Deathworlders would soon realize that humanity was not to be underestimated. For the first time in eons, the universe trembled. And this time, it was humanity who held the power.